There will never be a time when I'm just riding the wave and I'm done falling flat on my face. In answer to your question about like kind of how did I do this? What were the stages along the way? What did I have to break through? I think that understanding is one of the biggest. That it wasn't that I was reaching for 7 figures and then I could pat myself on the back and be done. I had to learn how to really fall in love with the whole process of growth. And when I did that, 7 figures just naturally came along the way. I'm not stopping there. That's just where we are right now.
Hey, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Oliver Wolf, your heart-centered master sales coach and pack leader from the Wolf Syndicate Coaching, helping entrepreneurs increase their closing ratio by 10 to 35% permanently. And now I want to welcome you to another episode of the Ultimate Closer Show, where I take awesome closers out of their productive days to invest their time into you. And so together we'll talk about sales theories, philosophies, as well as actionable strategies, tips, and methods to make sure that you're closing more deals and winning at life. And so today on our show, we have another very special guest, and my first female guest, which is super exciting. Her name is Jessie Johnson. Jessie is the founder and CEO of her own multi-million-dollar personal development company, where she helps ambitious, soulful, and service-based entrepreneurs add an extra zero to their monthly income with clarity, ease, and efficiency. And so now on a more personal level, I've actually only known Jessie for a couple of weeks now because I had one of our previous guests refer her to me. And so what I had asked our previous guest was, who's someone who would be great to have on the show and have a great conversation and who's an expert in the field of either sales or entrepreneurship? And she really checked all of those boxes off. And so we got on an initial call. And on that first call, I just really felt the energy, the excitement, the lightheartedness. She just seemed like someone who was filled with joy and fun. And so I'm really excited for this episode. So without further ado, Jessie, welcome to the show.
It's so nice to be here, Oliver. I'm really excited.
Totally. And so one of the first things I like to ask everybody, and again on the show, is really going right to the meat, which is, what's one of the biggest failures that you faced? How did you feel as you went through that failure? And then how did you make it through that feeling into overcoming it?
It's such a good question.
I know, it's fun.
Get into the vulnerability right away. And it's also interesting because I'm the kind of person that my default program on a moment to moment level tends to be that I'm failing all the time. And then since childhood, right? For whatever reason, I just got that not good enough program. And so on top of that,
that's like most people. So.
yeah. There's a constant kind of reminder program almost to cut through that's not actually, not that I'm never failing, but it's not constant, right? It's not a perpetual moment by moment failure. And so it's interesting when you first said the question, I had both responses kind of immediately, every second. And I was like, no, I don't think that's true. And then the other voice was doesn't really think about failure in those terms at all. Doesn't really believe in failure. I'm sure that people say that to you all the time because you're.
Well, that's actually the fun thing, right? I get some people on for example, what is it? Someone is like, well, I don't believe in failures. I believe in there's all that. Or someone, actually a good one, my last interviewee was Tuan, and he said he has a failure resume or something like that. So an actually written out resume of his failures to
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great, everybody should do that.
So what would you say comes up for you?
I am going to answer your question, but I'm thinking about something else. I've been watching Billions, this show on.
Oh yeah, I want to watch that. I haven't gotten the chance.
So without any spoiler, the show has 4 seasons, right? So you got to know that there's things happen and then they move on. But one of the things that's really striking is that all these powerful players have moments that just seem crushing. How could anybody recover? The show has to end. But then it doesn't. And they just not only continue, but they end up on top again. It's part of the soap opera drama, but it's also a really powerful reminder to me. We were just talking about this yesterday, that failure really is only a concept that's relevant when we quit.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so one of my practices has been in my business, I don't quit. That's I'm very loyal. I'm very dedicated. Kind of doesn't matter what happens. So I have rough months. I have rough days. I have rough, I wouldn't say I have rough years, but you know, like there is that going from being a high school teacher, working with New York City public schools, to running my own 7-figure company does not mean that I don't experience challenge and struggle. I experience them at just as much, just as intensely.
In different capacities, different levels.
Yeah.
I think that the ebbs and flows of life happen forever.
Yeah.
It's just so you get better at handling them and moving out of what you don't want in the moment, or at least moving through it. And I think that's really what's key between like those who are more victim and those who are more in power. And I don't mean power in terms of like hierarchy, I mean power in terms of self.
Sure.
Is that really like those victims, they go into the ebb, and then they just get stuck in the ebb and think that it's all about the ebb until they come. And then, but people like ourselves, and although we're always improving, are like good at turning that ebb back into flow, and vice versa sort of thing. But I think, like you said, no matter where you are, it's going to happen. And if it didn't, like, life would be boring, man.
For sure. And you know, the other thing, just to go back to math, because I taught algebra students for 7 years, and then I taught algebra teachers for another 5 years after that. And
boy, so you went for the class that, okay, not only did you, so you taught the class that most people are probably most scared of, and then you went and taught the people who teach the class.
That's right.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that actually part of I would truly call it trauma that most, for sure, American students and adults now as well experienced in math class comes from the fundamental misconception that mistakes are something to be avoided. So the whole paradigm in American classrooms, and this is more than American, but that's my expertise, so I'll limit it to that.
Yeah, for sure.
American classrooms, right? The sort of traditional teaching model is that the teacher models literally 1 to 3 problems and then gives the kids 50 problems like that, where they're just meant to repeat, and then they're scored, right? So they check or X for each one, and the number that they get right determines their success. And there's no inquiry, and there's no curiosity, and there's really no thinking that's either being taught or cultivated or valued. And so I think that's the fundamental sort of fight that I have with the concept of failure, is like, it is our mistake. And like, I'm literally racking my brain, like, what can I share with Oliver? Because I want to be vulnerable with you. But literally everything that I'm thinking of, I'm like, I just wouldn't call that a failure. Like, that was a challenge that I went through. And because of that, like, I couldn't have learned how to do what I'm doing any other way.
Cool.
I had to go through that.
Let's rephrase the question. Actually, a better way for you to maybe help you is like, what's one of the greatest challenges that you overcame? And again, because I still believe that whether you call it failure or challenge, there's a dipping point at some point, right? There's that sort of valley. And it's like, and what I feel people need to learn about a lot is that the emotions you get during that valley, right? What were they, and how did you move through them? So again, what's one of the biggest challenges you've had, and how did you face the emotional of going through that?
Well, since we're here to talk about sales, I'll tell a story about that.
Totally.
In March of 2016, I set my first financial goal in my business. I had been in business. I had my first client in January of that year. My first paying client, right, outside of New York City public schools. And so I had been building and learning, and I was moving pretty quick. And I set this goal to make $15,000 from my business in March. And I like did all this mindset work and came up with a plan and did whatever I did. And then the end of March came and went, and I didn't do it. And I was really pissed. Like, when you talk about the emotional experience, like, I was furious with myself. I felt like I had done it wrong. I think I was ashamed also, like what the fuck? Like I can't say that I'm going to do, like how unreliable am I?
My word, like.
Yeah. And also like if what I just didn't get the result, like what will? Like I worked my ass off.
There's like confusion, like paranoia almost setting in, like just a whole plethora of different toxic emotions.
Yeah. And I worked with my coach and applied a practice that I had been using, but it was the first time that I'd used it in this context, which was to just get curious. Like how, if I put on my mathematician hat instead of my judge, you know, what really happened? What did I do in March to create the result that I got? What did I not do in March to create the result that I got?
Cause
what
and
did
effect,
I say that I did that I was not going to do? What did I not say that I was going to do that I did? Like just to study what actually happened. And one of the biggest takeaways from that reflection was that I was overworking.
Interesting. I'm coming to that deep understanding as well, progressively.
You're talking about it in the flow state. You know, I think that's a popular concept these days, and it doesn't mean like playing video games all day.
Yeah, no, it's not the full feminine side of the pendulum. There's a beautiful balance.
But there's a real ease that I didn't even know how to reach for in a work context. Like when I was I taught meditation, I was very masterful in that context, but put me into my own business, where, by the way, for the first time in my life, I'm trying to make my own money instead of just get a paycheck. Like I had no idea what that looked like. So April, that following month, the whole month was like, what does it look like for this to be easy? Like, let me just envision if making this money, $15,000 in this month was easy, what would I do? What would I look like? Okay, I'm going to do it that way. And I did. And that month I made 20,000.
Very, very cool. I'm going to take a second to recognize how much you're on Fleek, by the way. We talked about this before the show. So she's got the red lipstick, the red dress, and the red mug. She's killing the game.
That's funny. I also have these flashlights that are branded. I can tell you about them. Actually, this could be my little secret for you.
Okay, so we're going to keep that towards the end.
Yeah, so we've got a whole color coordination thing happening.
I love it. I'm all about the that kind of stuff. You know, I got my brand here. I even planted that here. This over here. There it is. That was planted. There's literally something under it to like lift it. I'm just very intentional about that stuff, you know.
I love it.
Yeah, for sure. So I need to recognize that. But okay, cool. So yeah, I love that. That's such a good fact about like because this is what cool. So basically you had all these toxic sort of thought patterns that were coming up and such. And then really what it came down to is you, instead of, I guess, sort of like going down the spiral of despair, which so many people of course do, you got curious. Right? You got curious and you sort of wore that hat, the mathematical hat, and really tried to break it down to understand like really what happened. And then again, what I would interpret is you looked for the cause and effect, right? You didn't just like stare at the effect and like be sad about it. You really looked at, okay, well what caused this, right? There has to be a reason. And so that's, I think, really a great sort of methodical thing to say. It's like, guys, like if you're really in that low point, get out of it just by being curious about how you got there in the first place. What was the cause to that effect?
I also was working with my coach. I mean, that's an important feature that I think it's really essential to recognize, because none of us can see what we can't see.
Of course.
Like all I have to do is turn around and you can see the middle of my back, no problem. But for me to see the middle of my back is it's like physically not really possible. I have to use a mirror or another person to understand what's going on back there. So
totally. Thank you for reemphasizing that. That's definitely a good point.
and I will also say, just to put it out there, because this is the kind of thing that I know my clients can beat themselves up with. I beat myself up with this kind of thing. I did go down the spiral of despair. I did. I didn't avoid that. Not that time. And still in my life, I think I'm much more masterful at negotiating that, but it's not perfect. It's not like I never do that. It's that I'm much, much more conscious about what's happening when I do it and much more efficient at getting out of it.
Yeah.
But I think that you know, for me anyway, if I create a standard that like, I will never despair,
yes.
immediately that right there, then I'm doomed to fail.
Oh, for sure. And actually, I'm glad you bring that up too, because that's actually another good topic that I talk about with friends and such. Is like, I feel like there's this first level of like higher level consciousness where people will understand that it's the power of positivity and being grateful and compassionate, all that kind of stuff. But when people get too stuck into that level and they think it's always got to be positive, they start, like you said, beating themselves up for having some negative thoughts. But it's just, you need to understand that no matter how positive you are, there are still shadows to face and move through. And there are still going to be downtimes. And like you said, it's about how you move through those downtimes. And again, like you said, having someone else out there to sometimes call you forward and say like, hey, like, you're in a downtime right now. Like, this thing is not going the way you should want it to, or the way you like it to, or, you know, they'll call you forward back into your power. So very, very good points. Very cool. Okay. So that would have been a big challenge for sure. Then beyond that, in the business. So, I mean, you said 2016, so it's only been 2-3 years and you're at a 7-figure business, which is super powerful.
And I got to 7 figures in 2 years, which I would just emphasize cool. Because I think it's important for people to understand, like, that's possible. I literally had no sales experience. I'd never ever run or even thought about being in business. And I made that movement really quickly. And like, from the inside, I know that I slowed myself down throughout that process. So I also think it's possible for people to go from 0 to 7 much faster than I did.
Totally. Very cool. So naturally some questions people would be asking themselves, like, okay, well, how? And that's a little bit broad of a question. Maybe I'd like to ask you, like, well, how is it in terms of, because 2 years is still pretty fast still. Like, how did you keep up with that rate of growth? Was there some hiccups or some things you need to sort of really break through as thresholds to be able to, or what were some of those thresholds you had to break through?
There's lots of questions there. The first image that came to mind, I actually associate with a spiritual teacher named Ram Dass. Do you know him?
No, actually I don't.
He's his name was originally, I think it's Richard Alpert. He was a professor at Harvard, and he was studying LSD back in the 60s. Legally, like before they knew what it was, and they were like, what's happening with human consciousness? So he was a psychology professor or something. And he tasted these, like, basically he tasted enlightenment, and then it awoke in him this seeker. He went to India, and he's one of the more prominent teachers who brought, like, Eastern teachings back to the States. So he wrote a famous book called Be Here Now back in the 70s.
Interesting.
It's downstairs. Anyway, and like changed his name and really left Harvard, obviously, and became a spiritual teacher. And he talks about how we grow in body lengths.
In body lengths?
Body lengths. And the image is like, we're standing, we fall flat on our face, we crawl and stand up again. And then we repeat. Like that is the nature of personal development. Is that it's not just like occasionally we fall on our face. It's like, no, that's how we move. Like, we fall on our face.
And then you move up to that.
The whole body covers the body length.
And then you move up.
Exactly.
Interesting. That's hilarious. I would love to draw a diagram, like an animated diagram of someone just like snailing over or something. That would be hilarious.
And actually, it's funny. I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean right now, and there's some surfers that I saw out there this morning who, you know, really look at them and like they're spending almost all their time struggling. I would say. I mean, it looks like a struggle. I'm not so much a surfer,
I mean, they're smacking their face in the water pretty often. So yeah,
waiting, like, you know, working really hard to get out past the break waves, like. It's like the moments of actual surfing, the thing that I think of in my mind when I think about surfing, it's like 1% or something of the whole experience. Time-wise.
Yeah.
So
definitely not emotionally.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's funny how this theme of failure is now like spiraling through the whole conversation, because it's one of the biggest things that I have learned in my growth is that continues. Now, it's a kind of aggressive or violent image. Like
just smacking your face. Yeah, a little bit.
It doesn't have to be quite that painful. Okay. But there is never a point where like, and I've experienced this in the last, whatever it's been, 3.5 years, but now I also just believe that this is always going to be the case. There will never be a time when I'm just riding the wave and I'm done falling flat on my face. There will never be a point where I ride the wave into the sunset and the movie ends. Like, that's just not what happens. So in answer to your question about like kind of how did I do this? What were the stages along the way? What did I have to break through? I think that understanding is one of the biggest. That it wasn't that I was reaching for 7 figures and then I could pat myself on the back and be done. I had to learn how to really fall in love with the whole process of growth. And when I did that, 7 figures just naturally came along the way. I'm not stopping there. That's just where we are right now.
Totally.
I hired the absolute best coaches on the planet. I have had multiple coaches working with me at the same time. And part of what that means is that I had the best people teaching me, but it also means that I experienced investing in myself at a level that most people have never even considered.
Yeah, for sure.
Like when I started my business, I didn't even really know what coach. I mean, I was a math coach actually. Like I had a title of coach when I was working in public schools, but I didn't know what it meant to have a business as a coach. And you know, I was basically a school teacher. I'm kind of upgraded school teacher, but I was not making a lot of money. I had never made a lot of money. I had never considered making a lot of money. And I don't know, at that time, maybe I had purchased a really nice camera for myself. It was $5,000. That was probably the most I had ever spent on myself.
What kind of camera?
It was a Sony A7S.
Cool. Interesting.
Which
I don't know
actually,
what that is yet, but I'm just getting into it myself.
Now it's not even like the nicest camera because this is years ago, but I actually sold that camera to hire my first coach for my first program. But at this point, like in the last 3.5 years, I've spent, I'm not actually sure, maybe $750,000 on coaching. Right. An amount of money that I couldn't even imagine making, much less spending when I began the process. So that's been huge for me personally, because when I say I'm going to bring in the money, I do. Like, even that's why I was so mad at myself in March 2016, because I was like, I said I would do this, I got to do this. And then I did. But like, I personally have never been late on rent. I've never been like, when I have a bill to pay, I pay it. So one of the ways that I have learned how to increase my capacity when it comes to money is not just by earning more, but spending more.
Yes.
Because when I say I'm going to,
it's abundance versus scarcity.
Then I bring in the money to pay for that. I think it's abundance versus scarcity, but it's also, this is important for your audience to understand. Like, if you want to have more money in your life, that means that you need to be spending money differently, not just earning money differently. They go together. They're two sides of the same coin. So it's very similar to what you were just saying about positivity. If you're just wanting to look at one side of any coin, you are literally creating a blind spot that's going to catch you at some point. So that's one of the things that I see also just in my, I want to say peer group, like in my colleagues, that those of us who have really moved the fastest have done the most work on ourselves, which means that we've invested the most money in that work. And that, I think that you asked a really important question, like, how did you keep up with the level of growth? And I would say that's how.
Cool. Yeah. And then that definitely raises a whole other question I'd love to dive into. And I'm a huge advocate of what you're saying, like investing in yourself, and especially in a coach. I mean, it just multiplies in terms of the return. But so that naturally becomes, well, how do you know who's a good coach to hire? Like, why would I think this person over that person? And even actually, sorry, I want to make this a twofold question. So who, right, is one, like the person themselves, but then for what as well? Like, how do you identify what coach you should need? Like, for example, I'm specifically sales. I think you're also like pretty much specifically sales, but you also do mindset and other things as well. But there's so many different kinds of coaches too. So again, synthesizing that, how do you figure out what, and then how do you identify who?
You're reminding me, when I was a math coach, I read an article written by a guy whose name I'm forgetting. I'm going to find it as soon as we're done. Who wrote, he might have even written a book. He did a TED Talk and wrote this article that I read about coaching, and he was a surgeon.
Interesting.
And he did this really radical thing in going to find someone who could help him grow, because he had realized that he had, like, in his own mastery as a surgeon, he had tapered off. He wasn't getting worse, but he wasn't getting better.
Yeah,
his results were stagnating. Yeah. And so he found, I think it was like maybe one of his professors or some old colleague, someone who had retired, to simply come into the surgery
room. I heard about this. Continue. I heard about this. This is awesome.
And observe, and then afterwards give feedback. So, and it literally transformed his results. And part of the reason that the article was so powerful was because it made people really uncomfortable. Like, his choice to have someone in there made them doubt his mastery.
Ah, interesting.
Right? The vulnerability that he had to have in order to say, I want someone to come in here and help me grow, was misunderstood by a lot of people, that he must not be good enough already.
Right. Yeah. And there's a bit of an egotistical thing around that as well, right? So in the
there's
industry,
different fields. Yeah. There's different fields where it's normal, like in more like therapists regularly go to what's called supervision, which is basically going to someone who has the same expertise that they have or want for professional support.
Yep.
To help them grow as a professional, right? So that it's normal in that context, but it's not normal in most careers.
Yep, for sure.
So I like that story, because I think the first answer to your question is hire someone who's really good at the thing you want to be really good at.
Yep. Good.
Now, there are some exceptions to this. Like, I know some coaches who regularly coach, for example, like a mindset coach who works with Olympic athletes, right? The athlete could hire you or me or Rich Litvin or David Nagel or whoever it is that they wanted, who had mastery around mindset. They wouldn't be coming to us for athletic support, right? They wouldn't be coming to us to tweak their physical position. They'd be coming to us to tweak the thing that we are masterful at, which is understanding how the mindset affects our results. So that's, I'm naming that because I think that the athletic, like with the Olympic athlete, will also hire a coach who has mastery in their physical realm. So, in the beginning of my business, I had my primary mindset coach. I had, I would say, a legal coach who helped me build all my contracts. She was an attorney, but she understood coaching, and she didn't just do the work for me. She actually taught me.
Interesting. I might actually need that connection.
Yeah, that was great. I would even say that my accountant, the woman that I hired in the beginning of my business to do my financial management, also had a coaching lens and trained me in how to think about the money management. So I had lots of different coaches helping me with all kinds of things. The coaches that I would say contributed directly to me making money were mindset coaches.
Yeah.
And they helped me understand the truth of who I am and stop hiding behind codependency, apology, trying to be nice, trying to be liked. So it's not to say that one coach was more important than another, because they all were really significant.
They all play their parts for sure.
The sort of central coach in my life for my kind of business was definitely around mindset. And I think that, mindset is the place where we have truly exponential growth potential.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I feel like one of the biggest things, and it kind of speaks to the show Billions you were talking about earlier, which is, and we hear this in the real world, where there's millionaire or billionaire CEOs, they'll, lose everything or lose their job or whatever. And then within a year, they're back to making millions or billions again. And it's because they have the paradigm and the thermostat and just the way of being that's just their life. Like, they know how to do it. They know how to be it. They know how to attract it and all those kinds of things. And that's like a huge thing. So for sure, I would highly advocate that mindset coaching is important. And to a certain degree, any coach should have some understanding of mindset coaching as well. I mean, I don't feel like there's any coach that should be an expert at, I don't know, production or whatever, like systemizing, and then have no good understanding of mindset, because I think that like no matter what, mindset will come up in some shape or form, and you need to be ready to hold that space for your client.
I agree. And I mean, I would say the same thing about sales. I actually I don't think I know anyone that I think is truly masterful as a mindset coach that doesn't also have tremendous mastery in sales. I just don't.
They do kind of go hand in hand for sure.
You can do one without the other. But let's just say theoretically that it is possible. if an entrepreneur is looking for a coach, they need to have support around sales, and they need to have support around mindset for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And people ask me this question kind of regularly. I actually wrote an article recently where they asked me to kind of create the list of things to look for. And I found it really challenging because for me, it's not an intellectual exercise.
To look for a coach?
To find a coach.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew in my body immediately, this person has something that I want.
Mm.
And that I guess you could call it intuition or gut sense, that has guided me. And you can give my gut sense credit for my 7-figure business. It's like, so I wouldn't encourage people to do a ton of research or talk to 20 different coaches. Trust your gut and follow that. And the person that feels resonant, that you're willing, not you, Oliver, but you and the listeners, are willing to actually trust to guide you, then that's your person.
Totally. Cool. Yeah. And that's actually, it comes back to something else that was on one of my other interviews where we talked about, so I asked him, like, how do you know when to trust your intuition versus it potentially being a fight or flight paranoia of some kind? And his answer, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this, his answer was, as long as you're in a good state, right? Like you do the things to center yourself, to make sure that you're taken care of, that you feel compassion to yourself, your worth, all that kind of stuff, then that sense you get in your gut is proper intuition. But if you're not in a good state, if you're in a stress state, right, if your hormones are all out of whack, if you're a little bit freaked out and such from what's happening, then that gut instinct will likely be a fight or flight or disempowering intuition, not an actually guiding one. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
It's an interesting concept. I definitely agree that when we're in fight or flight, I don't think we can hear our intuition. I'm not sure that I think that fight or flight is intuition. I don't agree with that, but
then maybe call it like the feeling you get in your gut changes from intuition to something else. Maybe is that maybe better?
I think. Well, and I have two thoughts about this. There's this the principle that God or the universe or your divine guidance or this intuition, let's say, like the truth that's trying to talk to you. Mm-hmm. Whatever name you give that, simply does not communicate through fear.
Ah, interesting.
Which doesn't mean that you can't feel a no, right? Like since we're talking about finding a coach, you like talk with someone and you just feel like, oh, cool. Like I just don't really feel a whole lot about this person. That's fine. But that's if you're getting a like, I'm better run and hide, then that's another place where I would get curious. What is that desire to run and hide, protecting or covering? Mm-hmm. And because the truth is that I think this is a really important question, right? Because I mean, if your listeners are anything like the people that I talk to, anything like me, then just picking up the phone to cold call someone can bring up feelings of fear, anxiety, stress, fight or flight. Like, and there's no way that someone gets to that point where they're ready to pick up the phone without knowing that that's something that they're definitely going to do. That's like in alignment for them. But when we actually move towards that edge of transformation, growth, breakthrough, our subconscious is designed to like pull us back from that edge.
Yes.
So I do think it's been really helpful for me to understand that. Not that I don't listen to my fear at all, but that I just like listen to it it's like, oh, this is fear. So this is not the truth.
Sort of thing, but not necessarily lead with it, just acknowledge it.
Ever. The fear is, that's the thing. The fear is never speaking the truth. It might be pointing to something that wants to be seen, but the fear itself is never telling the true story, ever.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Sweet. So, okay. So let's see. Where I want to go from here? I guess we're actually kind of coming close to the end. So I'd love to maybe ask you, what is your ultimate closer secret that you could share, whether it's sales or it's that flashlight, up to you, or maybe you could share too, the flashlight and something about sales. But yeah, what's an ultimate closer secret that you'd love to share?
That there's so many things that I could talk about here. It's funny because you're right. We've like talked about everything but sales almost.
I feel like everything kind of intertwines, like all these things. Like, I mean, if you
it's all connected for sure.
You won't get good sales and all that fun stuff.
For sure. But I'm like aware we could spend another like 2 hours geeking out about sales strategy. I mean, I think the first thing about closing sales that comes up when I just say that phrase is that in my mind, good sales with integrity, sales that are about service, which is the only kind of sale that I'm interested in, they're about helping someone come to a clear yes or clear no. They're not actually about closing anything. It's about helping the person that you're talking to. And so if a person has a problem that you can solve, then of course it's your responsibility to sell them the product or service that you offer to help them solve that problem. But if they're not excited about it, or if they can't kind of find their own yes, then that's a no. And I want to celebrate that. I want to really, like, that's part of that unconditional, the two sides of the coin theme that we've been surfacing. It's like to be as excited about the no's as you are about the yeses, in my experience, makes all sales authentic and fun and generous. Which is just important to me, because if I feel like I'm trying to get something from someone, I'm definitely not leveraging all the resources that I have available to me, because I'm like, turning into a manipulative version of myself.
For sure. And I think I'll even highlight what you said. It's like coming from a place of service, right? Like as soon as you go from a place of service, you are giving. Whereas when you're trying to get the sale, you are taking, right? So that's very true. Actually, let's take some time into this. I'm actually too excited now. So what were we going to say though? Continue.
I think that's one of the powerful things about sales that most people don't understand, because they either, I actually think that the trend is that the thing that people think of when they think of sales is what has happened when they were talking with someone who wasn't very good at sales, or someone who was really nervous about sales, or someone who, right? In other words, like someone who is just immature in their sales process. They might have even been trying to be helpful, but they just aren't very good at it yet. They haven't cleared out.
They don't know how, they don't know like basic methodologies, because there's strategies that help make it that you can properly serve. So
those are bad sales. Like what people think of as sales, generally speaking, those are not sales. Those are bad sales. All the things, and it's funny to use that word, but for our purposes, the good sales are the ones that you don't even really think of as sales, because they're so fun. They feel so aligned. It's like, oh, I'm super excited to buy that car, TV, service, rent that house.
Yeah, you don't
get
feel
that gaming chair. And so there's partly like a societal, I think that's a mindset issue. So I'm saying that because I actually, I want to put forth that all sales are service, even the ones that are done badly. The like heart of them comes from one person trying to help another. They might not be good at it. They might not be skillful at it. They might not be graceful about it. They might have their own emotional material, get in there and hijack things. But the heart of the intention is meant to help people. And so from that point of view, when a sale happens, it does typically mean that money moves from one person to another. But that's a secondary thing. The first thing is that the service happens. And so I think that that's important. Like, as entrepreneurs and business owners, do we have to do sales in order to keep our businesses going? Yes. Because we need money, yes. But also because we're here to be of service. Like, that's the whole point. How do we be of service? We sell what we do. We sell what we have. We sell the solutions that we master. So
the big thing I've sort of come into as well is like just the monetary payment of something is simply just the energetic exchange, right? It's like without that, there's just it doesn't feel right to both the buyer and the seller to exchange a service or product or anything for no money in return or for nothing in return. It just doesn't feel right for both parties, right? Like,
can I disagree with you?
Oh, please.
I love it when people give me shit.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Like, I don't mind. People can give me stuff all day long, services, products. I don't mind. I'm happy to receive those things.
Totally.
There's a difference when I invest in something that matters to me. There is an additional value in me putting that money into something. We talked about this at the beginning. That part of why I know how to have a 7-figure business is because I have invested in myself at almost 7 figures. You know, like there's a relationship there. So actually, the last time that I gave a physical check to one of my coaches, I also brought her a gift. I make these malas, these beautiful necklaces. So I had that gift for her, and I had this check for $50,000. And I went over to her house because she is not so far from me. And I gave her the mala, the necklace, and I said, "This is for you." And I gave her the check, and I said, "This is for me."
Interesting. I like that.
So I think that that's important. Like, it's not actually that I disagree with you, but I'm being a little provocative because I want to challenge that like, actually there doesn't even have to be an energetic exchange. I want there to be one. I want to invest in myself in this way. I get to choose that 100%. Nobody else has any role in that. And then I just get to, we're all free. You're free to charge what you want. I'm free to pay that fee or not. And it does feel like this wants to come in. So this flashlight, which says JJC, my little brand, is one of my favorite tools to get my bullshit out of the way.
Interesting.
Right? The way that I use the metaphor is like this. This is my attention. So if I'm having a sales conversation with someone, my attention ideally is focused on them completely. This is how I'm of service. But inevitably something happens, they say something provocative, or I get triggered, or I don't know, whatever happens, right? As soon as that happens, I'm literally blinded by the light of my own flashlight.
Interesting.
I can't see anything because I'm too busy worrying. Am I enough? Am I doing it right? Am I going to get the money? Oh, fuck, I want the money. I don't know. I shouldn't be thinking about the money, right? Like, it's a whole spiral of distraction. So I literally have had a flashlight on my desk since I started my business because it reminds me like, oh yeah, that's not my job right now. I literally don't have to pay any attention to the words that come out of my own head when the flashlight is on me. I just need to turn the flashlight back on the person in front of me.
Very
so
cool.
I have a like, you know, notepad that I write down like the moment that it happened. That's how I turn the flashlight back on the person in front of me. And then that's the practice. And I will say this too, I teach sales as a spiritual practice, and that's why I call it that. It is a spiritual practice to take the reins of your own attention. And sales is a brilliant practice for doing that.
Very cool. I've not heard someone say those kinds of things together, because I do spiritual practices and I sell, and I see how they kind of come in together, but I've never actually thought of it as using sales as a spiritual practice. That's very interesting.
I mean, because I think you need, somehow this makes it clear. It's like the practice of keeping my attention here. And every time it flips back this way, to pivot my attention back. That's the practice. And you simply cannot do sales, in my opinion, gracefully, skillfully, masterfully in service to another person and not be taking the reins on your own emotional, spiritual, intellectual attention. It just has to keep coming back to the person in front of you. So it's like they become the object of your meditation.
Totally. Cool. That's a fun way to finish this. I like this. Okay, cool. So That was a great secret. And yeah, so, you know, if someone does want to find you or your coaching, what's the best way they can find you? Where can they go?
My website is jessiejohnsoncoaching.com, Jesse. There's no I in my name. I've got a very vibrant Instagram page that people like a lot. I put out blogs or videos at least once a week. So we've got lots of free content. And yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, the relationships that actually matter the most in my business are the ones that get to this level of depth and personal connection. So if somebody hears this and feels that sense of connection, I would just invite you to email me, reach out, you know, DM me, whatever feels like the right approach to just be bold and introduce yourself.
Very cool. Whatever platform you need to be on the edge of your authenticity, go for it. Awesome. So to recap the episode on this episode of the Ultimate Closer Show, we had the epic privilege to dig into some sales theories and philosophies, although mostly kind of just converse about a lot of just general ideas of things that are important to understand about yourself and about life and such. But we still got into some tips and methods to make sure that you're closing more deals and winning at life here with Jesse. And so more specifically, some of the notes that I was taking is that, you know, we learned about like embracing the ebbs and flows of life and how to move in and out of them. We talked about understanding how to move through the downward spiral and that it's totally normal to have that. And it's about getting better at knowing how to move through those things. We talked about how to make it to a 7-figure business. Talked about spending to make more money. So just spending, again, like you said to yourself, or I kind of interpret it as like spending in a more abundant way, like just not being afraid to invest in yourself, in a coach, in the things that will allow you to make more money. That's one of the most beautiful things you can do for yourself. How to choose the right coach. I really like that part. That was fun. How there was some mechanics to it, but there was also really like, in the end, it's like, does it feel right? So that was huge. And then the power of the flashlight. I'm totally incentivized to get a flashlight now. And I bet like,
I'll send you one.
Oh, will? Cool. Amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, do you have like a link where people can actually go buy them, or is this just for you?
That's such a good idea. I give them to my clients.
There you go.
But you're inspiring me. We'll see.
Yeah, well, now it's like every time you're on these podcasts, be like, by the way, you want to get your own custom flashlight? Ting. But and so everybody watching, don't forget to comment at least one actionable step that you'll take from this episode, and as well make one of the other actionable steps to subscribe to the channel, because there's a lot more coming to you from the TWS Sales Success and Adventures channel. And once again, Jesse, thank you so much for being on the show. I wish everybody, yes, and I wish everybody an ultimate closer day.
Woohoo.